gymnastics lessons in here. You ready? Dave, thanks for joining RCR at Futurecom this year. Tell us about your role, and then I'd like to talk about the evolution of NFV to SDN.
Sure. So my role in HP is to leverage the breadth of a lot of the horizontal assets that's, a mega corporation like HP in the IT world, and anything telco specific and specialized, whether it be a software IP asset or the integration services, et cetera, and whether it's people or software assets, et cetera. Anything that's telco specific is in my shop. So we try and pull all the pieces together, Lego blocks, and make compelling solutions for operators.
What is your opinion of how the market's going to evolve through NFV and then ultimately to SDN?
I see it as a couple waves. I think NFV is happening on a faster time scale. I think the return is more clear and quicker. I think just virtualizing all the apps that have been running on proprietary hardware, proprietary middleware for years and years. You walk through a network center or an OSS center in a classical operator, and you'll see dozens of different shapes and form factors, etc. All of that transitioning to common off-the-shelf hardware. Classical blades implies a layer of virtualization and all of the apps. So I think that the return is very, very good on that. I think we're up to 84 different POCs around the world. Every carrier on the planet is heading that way. They're going to see significant cost reductions on the hardware, and they're going to see significant agility in terms of being able to ramp up new things, roll out new services, scale capacity, etc. So agility and cost, you can't get to the heart of a mobile operator much better than talking about agility and cost.
And so SDN, how do you view SDN? And you mentioned earlier the kind of dumbing down of the network, but talk about SDN from your point of view.
Sure. So I think that it's a little slower, but I think it's equally important, if not more so. I think in the end, the actual routers and switches are going to be simpler, cleaner, and cheaper. And the separating the bearer path, so that you separate it out. And I go back to the old SS7 days as being a carrier telco guy, but taking the cost out of the IP routers and switches and having them controlled by an open flow controller, I think is a significant evolution that's going to play out over the next couple of years. And I think HP has a really key role to play. If you think of our networking assets, you think of our server conversion infrastructure assets, and then you think of my team and our role in terms of knowing telco. There's very few, if any, companies on the planet that have all of those pieces that can actually, I talked about the POCs, put it all together and make it real.
So let's talk about some of the acquisitions HP has made over the years, going back to 3Com. What does that mean in terms of your market share in the IP router and switching world, and then followed on by the autonomy and Vertica acquisitions. How do you tie that together in this world of NFV and SDN, and how does it play into your strategy?
So sort of two different things there. One, if you think of just the converged infrastructure, HP having the core networking asset is very, very important to, as I spoke to earlier, for NFV and SDN. So us being able to have all the Lego blocks and piece these solutions together. So working with my peers and my partners on the HP networking and the HP server side is critical, and we've picked up some of those assets organically and some of them inorganically, as you mentioned. In terms of big data analytics, probably the most important thing strategically for a mobile operator these days is not to become a commodity pipe. They need to differentiate so the experience on their network is better than somebody else's. The way they do that is analytics of the subscriber data. They own the subscriber. They want to be able to monetize that. If you look at that at 100,000 feet, there's really two types. It's big data, but it's real-time data, so you need to be fast. And knowing what somebody did yesterday is not particularly compelling. Knowing what they're doing this instant in time allows you to do all kinds of use cases. So if you look at our Vertica structured data acquisition, it's a very powerful set of software around managing the structured data. And then if you look at autonomy and unstructured data, putting those two side by side, embedding them in a mobile operator environment, and it makes some incredibly powerful use cases to allow them to monetize that subscriber data in real time.
So when do you expect to see this, I call it a collision, if you will, where you have this virtualized network colliding with effectively structured, unstructured data in real time? When do those come together to result in material impact for a carrier in terms of cost decline and ARPU increase?
The actual analytics use cases are happening now. I think the real latency there is around privacy and making sure you get opt-in rules so that it's not a technology hurdle. It's the mobile operators making sure they maintain their brand and their trust, and they can only go so fast. But the use cases are real and living today. In terms of virtualization and such, it really comes down to whether the telcos will sort of do a rip and replace or an overlay type strategy. And if you think of all the major disruptions over the year, it's the same thing. They have to go fairly fast, a lot like voice over IP, otherwise it'll be done to them. At the same time, I don't really see them taking out a lot of their core parts of the network. So looking at what applications they want to virtualize in what order, and whether it's a technology refresh cycle or whether it's a rip and replace, comes down to the business case. So what I see happening is that refresh rate sort of happening in the evolution path. The intriguing thing to me is what I think of as the revolution path. Does somebody come out and build an overlay, fully virtualized, fully SDN compliant network at a fraction of the cost, and start doing phones, but also doing machine to machine? We're talking about 80 billion connected devices by 2020, I think is the latest number. Somebody builds a network that's pennies a subscriber by leveraging these technologies, then you don't really have to rip and replace anything. So I see two parallel paths, the evolution and the revolution, and I think the mobile operators need to keep an eye on both, and perhaps it'll be a refresh rate thing, but perhaps as well it'll be an overlay for certain applications like machine to machine.
Well, we're here in Latin America, and there's been two big themes I've been hearing all week. Number one, quality. The regulators are forcing the carriers to focus on quality. And then secondly, this notion of leapfrogging. So in some respects, the late followers are going to be at an advantage because they're starting to implement technologies today and haven't had to go through the migration from these iterative technologies in another market where you went from 3G to 3.5G to 4G. Do you put Latin America in that revolution category where they're going to be able to build an overlay network that's purely virtualized?
I'm definitely seeing things happen faster in the emerging world. Latin America being part of that. We're seeing the same thing in Middle East, Africa, Eastern Europe, etc., whereas Western Europe and North America tends to be flatter. So a bunch of reasons for that. Part of it is the less installed base, so you have more of a greenfield environment, you can go faster. I also think the subscriber base is not so much more inventive, they're more tolerant. You can do things like very creative scenarios. If you look at here in Latin America, the charging per call rather than per minute just caught on like crazy, giving free Facebook access on smartphones. There's all kinds of scenarios where they were able to roll them out in weeks and months. And I think the more mature subscriber base in the classical, the Western world, Western Europe and the Americas it's not so much that they're intolerant to that, they don't tend to play with the rate plans and such quite as quickly and innovate on the same cycle that Latin America does.
Is that a function in some part of Latin America being more prepay perhaps than other parts of the world?
I think yes, that's part of it, prepay versus post. I just think that generally it comes down to they're still growing. So when you have a growing business, you can innovate. There's more oxygen in the system. There's a bunch of dynamics, but for all of the above reasons, in the end, we just see a lot of things moving a lot faster in some of these emerging markets.
Thanks for your time.
You're more than welcome. Great talking to you.
Perfect. So where were you before? Let me turn this off.
Microsoft for 5 years and